A calm, upscale restaurant setting introduces the scene in a way that feels almost untouched by conflict, where everything is arranged with intention and quiet precision. The lighting is soft, casting a warm glow over polished tables, neatly folded napkins, and perfectly aligned cutlery that reflects a subtle shine under the overhead fixtures. The hum of conversation stays low, never rising above a comfortable murmur, as if each guest understands the unspoken etiquette of the environment they are in. There is a rhythm to the space, not rushed but steady, where servers glide between tables with trays balanced carefully in hand, maintaining composure while observing everything without drawing attention to themselves. The air carries a faint blend of aromas, a mix of freshly prepared dishes, brewed coffee, and subtle hints of spices that drift from the kitchen. Each scent contributes to the atmosphere without overpowering it, reinforcing the sense that this is a place where details matter. Guests sit in pairs or small groups, leaning slightly forward in conversation, occasionally pausing to sip from their glasses or glance around the room. Their attire reflects a range of styles, though all align with the expectation of the setting, reinforcing the impression that this is a space designed for those who are accustomed to refinement and quiet exclusivity. In one section of the dining area, the seating arrangement creates a sense of privacy, with tables spaced just far enough apart to allow conversations to remain contained. The background music plays softly, a curated selection of instrumental pieces that blend into the environment rather than dominate it. It fills the silence between conversations, smoothing the edges of the room's quiet energy. The staff moves in coordinated patterns, aware of timing and spacing, anticipating needs before they are spoken. A glass is refilled without interruption, a plate replaced without disruption, a check delivered at the precise moment it is expected. At the center of this environment is a sense of order that feels almost rehearsed, as though every element has been carefully designed to maintain balance. The lighting does not flicker, the noise does not spike, and no sudden interruptions break the flow of the evening. Even the entrance and exit of guests follow a predictable rhythm, with doors opening and closing softly, allowing new arrivals to blend seamlessly into the setting. The reception area remains attentive, greeting individuals with a composed professionalism that matches the tone of the space. The layout of the restaurant itself contributes to the overall impression, with clean lines, tasteful decor, and a layout that guides movement without confusion. Chairs are positioned with enough space to allow comfort, while still maintaining an intimate atmosphere. Tables are dressed in neutral tones, allowing the focus to remain on the experience rather than the surroundings. Everything feels intentional but not overwhelming, elegant without being excessive, creating an environment where attention to detail is evident in every corner. Within this controlled and refined atmosphere, there is an underlying expectation of behavior that aligns with the setting. Guests are aware, whether consciously or not, that their actions are part of a shared environment that relies on mutual respect and restraint. Conversations remain measured, laughter is contained, and gestures are subtle. It is a place where appearance and conduct carry equal weight, where the atmosphere depends not just on the physical surroundings, but on how each person contributes to maintaining it. A professional black waitress going about her routine moves through the restaurant with a steady sense of purpose, carrying herself with the kind of composure that comes from experience and repetition. Her uniform is neat and well-maintained, fitting properly and presenting a polished appearance that matches the expectations of the establishment. Each step she takes is deliberate but fluid, avoiding unnecessary haste while still keeping pace with the flow of the evening. She balances trays with practiced ease, navigating between tables without hesitation, aware of her surroundings and the people within them. Her attention is divided in a careful way, focused on both the tasks in front of her and the subtle cues coming from the guests she serves. She listens closely when orders are given, repeating them back with clarity to ensure accuracy, making note of preferences and small details that might otherwise be overlooked. There is a rhythm to her movements, a pattern built from repetition, where each action follows the last without disruption. She places dishes down gently, arranges utensils with precision, and steps back just enough to allow guests their space while remaining within reach if needed. Her expression remains calm and professional, reflecting a balance between attentiveness and restraint. She acknowledges guests with brief eye contact and polite gestures, maintaining a level of engagement that is respectful but not intrusive. In moments where conversation is required, she responds with clear and concise language, ensuring that communication is effective without drawing unnecessary attention. Her presence is steady, contributing to the overall atmosphere of the restaurant without disrupting it, blending into the environment while still fulfilling her responsibilities with care. She moves between tables that vary in their dynamics, some filled with quiet conversation, others more animated. Each interaction requires a slight adjustment in tone and pace, and she adapts smoothly, reading the room as she goes. When approaching a table, she pauses briefly to assess the situation before stepping in, making sure not to interrupt ongoing discussions. When leaving, she does so with the same quiet efficiency, ensuring that nothing is left incomplete. Her awareness extends beyond the immediate task, encompassing the broader flow of service within the space, coordinating her actions with those of her colleagues without needing constant direction. There is a sense of consistency in her work, a reliability that comes from showing up prepared and maintaining focus throughout the shift. She handles multiple responsibilities at once, remembering orders, timing deliveries, checking on tables, and responding to requests as they arise. Each task is completed with attention to detail, reflecting a standard that is maintained regardless of the circumstances around her. Even when the pace of the restaurant increases, she adjusts accordingly, increasing her efficiency while preserving accuracy. Her interactions with guests are shaped by professionalism, ensuring that each person feels acknowledged without crossing personal boundaries. She remains courteous, addressing requests directly and confirming understanding before proceeding. When faced with questions, she responds with clarity, providing information that is helpful and relevant. Her tone remains even, neither overly familiar nor distant, striking a balance that aligns with the expectations of the role she fulfills. Throughout the evening, she continues this pattern of movement and interaction, maintaining her focus despite the many variables present in the environment. The demands of the job require constant awareness, and she meets those demands through a combination of discipline and familiarity with the setting. Her role is essential to the functioning of the restaurant, and her ability to perform it with consistency contributes to the smooth operation of the entire space. A billionaire customer begins inappropriate behavior in a subtle way at first, the kind that could easily be dismissed or overlooked if not closely observed. His presence carries a sense of confidence that borders on entitlement, as if the usual boundaries that apply to others do not apply to him. He speaks casually at the start, engaging in light conversation, but there is an undertone in his tone that gradually reveals a lack of respect for the professional space he is in. His body language leans back more than necessary, his gestures becoming increasingly relaxed, signaling a comfort that shifts into disregard for the norms of the setting. As the interaction continues, his remarks begin to change in nature, moving from neutral comments to ones that carry a suggestive edge. The words are not immediately aggressive, but they are out of place, creating discomfort that may not be visible to everyone around but is noticeable to the person receiving them. He tests the limits of the conversation, inserting comments that are personal rather than professional, and watching for reactions that might encourage him to continue. Each response he receives seems to either embolden him or confirm that he can proceed without immediate consequence. His tone becomes more persistent, and the way he addresses the waitress begins to shift from respectful customer interaction to something less appropriate. He may repeat phrases, linger on certain words, or emphasize points that are not related to the service being provided. The subtlety fades as he grows more confident, assuming that his status or wealth places him in a position where normal expectations of conduct are flexible. His attention is no longer solely on the dining experience, but on the person serving him, redirecting the interaction into a direction that is neither requested nor welcomed. There is a noticeable change in his demeanor as he continues, as though the environment itself is something he feels entitled to influence. His gestures become more direct, his gaze more fixed, and his comments less filtered. The line between casual conversation and inappropriate behavior becomes increasingly blurred from his perspective, though it remains clear to those observing or experiencing it. He does not appear concerned with how his actions are perceived by others nearby, maintaining a level of confidence that suggests he believes there will be no immediate challenge to his behavior. The interaction begins to carry an underlying tension, even if it is not openly acknowledged by everyone present. The contrast between the professional setting and his conduct creates a subtle disruption in the atmosphere, one that may be felt more than seen. The structured rhythm of service continues around him, but his table becomes a point where that rhythm feels slightly altered. His continued remarks and behavior introduce an imbalance, shifting the interaction away from a standard exchange between guest and server into something more uncomfortable and difficult to ignore. Despite the outward calm of the environment, his actions introduce an element that does not align with the expectations of mutual respect that define the space. He does not adjust his behavior in response to the setting, instead maintaining and even escalating the same pattern of speech and attention. His assumptions about control and influence appear to guide his actions, as he continues to engage in a manner that disregards the professional boundaries that should remain in place. Tension builds as boundaries are crossed in a gradual but noticeable progression, where each small step adds to an atmosphere that begins to feel increasingly uneasy for those directly involved. What starts as subtle discomfort slowly evolves into something more defined, as the nature of the interaction becomes harder to ignore. The shift is not abrupt but layered, with each remark, gesture, or moment of prolonged attention contributing to a growing sense that the situation is moving beyond acceptable limits. The surrounding environment continues its usual rhythm, yet within this specific interaction, the energy feels altered, as though a quiet imbalance has taken hold. The waitress, maintaining her professional demeanor, becomes more aware of the direction the conversation is taking. Her responses remain measured, designed to acknowledge without encouraging further escalation. There is a careful effort to maintain composure, to keep the interaction within the boundaries of her role while signaling, through tone and brevity, that certain lines should not be crossed. Even so, the persistence of the behavior from the customer creates an increasing sense of pressure, requiring her to remain alert and attentive to both the words being spoken and the intent behind them. The billionaire's continued remarks begin to extend beyond casual conversation, settling into a pattern that no longer aligns with the expectations of the setting. His tone, once neutral, now carries a degree of insistence that suggests he is testing how far he can go without consequence. Each comment builds upon the last, reinforcing a dynamic where he appears to expect engagement on his terms. The boundaries that typically guide interactions between staff and guests are gradually challenged, not through a single action, but through repeated instances that accumulate over time. Nearby, the general flow of the restaurant continues without interruption, yet subtle shifts in awareness may begin to occur among those who happen to notice the exchange. Conversations at adjacent tables proceed, but the contrast between the calm environment and the tension at this particular table becomes more apparent when observed closely. The difference in tone, posture, and engagement creates a kind of visual and emotional discrepancy that stands out within the otherwise consistent setting. The waitress adjusts her posture slightly, maintaining professionalism while also creating a small degree of distance through her responses. Her body language reflects attentiveness without openness, a balance that allows her to continue fulfilling her duties while also signaling restraint. She avoids unnecessary prolonging of the interaction, focusing instead on completing tasks efficiently and preparing to move on when appropriate. Each moment she remains at the table is handled with care, ensuring that her conduct remains aligned with the expectations of her position. As the interaction continues, The persistence of the customer introduces a level of discomfort that becomes more difficult to mask. The repeated nature of his comments, along with the tone in which they are delivered, contributes to a growing sense that the situation is no longer a standard exchange. The boundaries that typically regulate behavior in such a setting are no longer being respected in a consistent manner, and this ongoing pattern creates a strain within the interaction that is increasingly visible in the subtleties of their exchange. The environment around them remains structured and composed, yet the contrast between the broader setting and this specific interaction highlights the imbalance that is developing. The tension does not disrupt the entire space, but it anchors itself within this single point, where the expectations of professionalism and mutual respect are being challenged. Each passing moment adds to the weight of the situation, reinforcing the sense that the boundaries have not only been approached but crossed in a way that cannot easily be overlooked. The waitress takes a stand and removes him in a moment that reflects both clarity of judgment and controlled confidence, choosing to act after recognizing that the boundaries of professional conduct have been repeatedly ignored. Her decision is not impulsive but shaped by the accumulation of prior interactions that have made the situation increasingly untenable. She approaches the table with a composed expression, her posture upright and steady, signaling that the interaction is about to change direction. There is no visible sign of agitation, only a firm sense of purpose that guides her movements and words. When she speaks, her tone remains respectful but carries an unmistakable firmness that distinguishes it from her earlier responses. She addresses the situation directly, avoiding ambiguity, and makes it clear that the behavior exhibited does not align with the standards of the establishment. Her words are measured, chosen carefully to maintain professionalism while also conveying the seriousness of the moment. She does not raise her voice or engage in confrontation beyond what is necessary, but the clarity in her delivery leaves little room for misinterpretation. Her stance reflects an understanding of her role and the authority that comes with maintaining a safe and respectful environment for both staff and guests. Rather than continuing to tolerate conduct that disrupts that environment, she prioritizes the integrity of the space and the well-being of those within it. The decision to remove the customer is executed with calm precision, as she avoids escalation while still asserting control over the situation. She communicates the expectation that the individual must leave, reinforcing the boundaries that have been crossed. The billionaire's reaction introduces another layer to the moment, as his initial confidence begins to shift in response to being challenged. The dynamic at the table changes, with the earlier sense of control he exhibited now replaced by a confrontation he may not have anticipated in this setting. His posture and tone may adjust as the reality of the situation becomes clearer, revealing a contrast between expectation and outcome. The interaction is no longer one-sided, as the waitress's firm response establishes a new balance where his previous behavior is no longer being accommodated. Other staff members become subtly aware of the situation, maintaining their duties while also remaining attentive to the unfolding exchange. The environment itself remains composed, but within this specific interaction, the tone has shifted from passive service to active resolution. The decision made by the waitress is supported by the implicit structure of the workplace, where maintaining respect and order is part of the shared responsibility among staff. Her actions align with the broader standards of conduct that govern the space, ensuring that the experience of others is not compromised. The process of removing the customer is handled without unnecessary disruption, as the emphasis remains on de-escalation rather than confrontation. The waitress maintains a level of professionalism that keeps the interaction contained, avoiding any actions that would further intensify the situation. Her focus remains on completing the task efficiently while minimizing attention from other guests. The tone of the exchange is steady and controlled, reflecting a clear boundary that has now been enforced. In this moment, her role extends beyond routine service into the enforcement of the environment's expectations, demonstrating accountability in the face of behavior that cannot be ignored. The decision to take a stand is reflected not through dramatic action, but through composed authority and consistent adherence to professional standards. The interaction concludes at the table with a shift in presence and direction, as the customer is guided toward leaving, and the immediate tension begins to transition into resolution within the space that continues to operate around them. The unexpected arrival of his father with a helicopter offer shifts the situation in a way that redefines the tone and direction of the entire evening, introducing a new layer of authority and influence that contrasts sharply with the moment that had just unfolded. The atmosphere, which had been centered around a contained interaction at a single table, now expands outward as attention subtly begins to redirect toward this sudden development. The entrance of a figure associated with even greater status changes the dynamics, not through immediate confrontation, but through presence and implication, as the significance of the arrival becomes apparent to those who become aware of it. The mention or visible presence of a helicopter adds an element that signals urgency, power, and resources beyond the ordinary expectations of the setting. It suggests that the situation is no longer confined to the boundaries of the restaurant, but is now connected to external influence that carries its own weight. The father's arrival is not simply a personal visit, but one that appears to bring with it a proposition, one that is symbolized by the offer of transport rather than words alone. This detail introduces a sense of scale that contrasts with the earlier tension, expanding the context in which the events are taking place. The timing of the arrival plays a significant role in shaping the perception of the moment, as it follows closely after the confrontation and removal of the billionaire from the table. This sequence creates a layered narrative within the same setting, where one interaction concludes only to be followed by another that carries a different kind of significance. The father's presence introduces a new authority figure into the situation, one whose actions may be driven by awareness of what has just occurred, or by an independent purpose that intersects with the unfolding events. Within the restaurant, the subtle awareness of this arrival begins to shift attention, as staff and nearby guests may notice changes in movement or tone that signal something unusual. The structured environment remains intact, yet the introduction of an external element, such as a helicopter offer, creates a contrast that is difficult to ignore. It suggests that the individuals involved are operating within a sphere where decisions and responses can extend beyond the immediate setting, influenced by resources and options that are not commonly available in everyday circumstances. The father's approach carries a sense of composure and control, reflecting a familiarity with situations that require quick decisions and decisive action. His presence does not rely on dramatic expression, but instead conveys authority through calm assurance. The offer associated with the helicopter is not merely a mode of transport, but a representation of readiness, flexibility, and the ability to act without delay. It introduces a shift in perspective, where the conversation is no longer limited to the events that took place at the table, but now includes considerations of movement, response, and next steps beyond the location. For those observing or aware of the situation, the contrast between the earlier confrontation and this new development creates a layered impression of how quickly circumstances can evolve. The sequence of events moves from tension within a contained interaction to the introduction of external influence that carries broader implications. The environment, while still functioning as a restaurant, now becomes the backdrop for a series of interconnected moments that extend beyond its original scope, as the presence of the father and the mention of a helicopter reframe the narrative into something larger and more complex within the same unfolding scene.